Officially, good day to everyone. I'm not sure. We know some in North America, we have some in Saudi, so it is good morning for some, good evening for others. Welcome to this webinar. As I was saying before the webinar, before the recording, is that the intention here today is not to present a PowerPoint presentation. Rather, I want to go through a few points to give a bit of history and background around this topic, and then open it up for debate and discussion. So welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Let me start with a bit of history. I think many of us have studied project management or learned about project management, or at least become familiar with the PMI's PMBOK guide. And one of the challenges of the PMBOK guide, and opportunity, maybe I should say, the way it was designed to be a generic reference to apply for project management of all domain. This is one of the reasons structured around process groups and knowledge area. I'm going to go back to the original edition. Bill Duncan is not with us. He was the one who led the original version. But Bill and I have had a lot of discussion over the years on this. And the primary idea was that to make project management, how can we create a guide or a standard for project management that have maybe a more global appeal? And the design was that, okay, we focus on knowledge area. What are the knowledge areas that we need for managing project? And what are the processes and grouped in a process group that help us to manage project? So if we look at the process groups of a guide like the PMBOK guide, and also in the ISO 2012 edition, they are really, I know Bill would probably tell you they are not borrowed from the PDCA cycle, but more or less, they follow the principle is that in anything we do in life, whether we want to create a sandwich or build a power plant, we need to have some kind of planning. We plan, we do. As we do, implement, execute, work, and according to the plan, sometimes things will not go according to plan. So what we have to do, we have to continue to monitor and check. And if we are deviating from the process, we correct. This is a principle that is universal in project management and outside of project management and quality management. And that was the PMBOK guide, how it started. However, for those who had actually had the privilege of reading the first guide, the one that Bill worked on, it includes many examples of life cycles. Now, why do I say example? Why the PMBOK guide did not focus on examples or on life cycle model? Because process group are generic, regardless of what domain. As I mentioned, whether you are in project management or outside, and in project management, whether you are working on an IT project or a software project or a marketing project, they are the same. What's different is that in every industry, in every domain, life cycles look somewhat different. The life cycle, which is basically how do we take a project from idea to closure or even beyond. Usually we follow some kind of a project life cycle. Now, in that original guide, the 1996 version of the PMBOK guide, Bill and the team have shared with us many examples of project life cycle from different domains to explain to us that the process group usually repeat in every phase of the project life cycle. So we have to manage project. Basically, the argument is to manage project, we need to have a project life cycle that go from beginning all the way to the end. And where's the beginning and end, that sometimes we don't agree on. And then that life cycle is typically divided into a smaller time segment. We call them phases or stages. And the process group repeat in each one of them. So the process group are not project phases. However, unfortunately, because of certification, training, and often enough, many people who are leading certification training, they did not really fully understand the PMBOK guide and the intent of the guide. And with time, as the PMBOK guide was evolving into the 2000 edition, and then the third, the fourth, the fifth edition, the project lifecycle almost disappeared completely from the guide. So the disappearance of the life cycle from the guide, I mean, I would be it would be challenging to find a single chart in the whole Pumbaa guide, whether the 3rd, the 4th, or the 5th edition, that include a life cycle with stage gate, for example, right? Which is a core part of any method in industrial project or in many projects, that they have to have a life cycle with gates. But it disappeared completely from the Pumbaa guide. And as a result, part of it as well was focused on certification training, that many people confuse the process group as project stages, and basically they call the process group as a project management life cycle or the project life cycle. That created a lot of confusion, and it continues today. And we often get so many topics on even paper and even presentation and even courses that confuse the process group with the project life cycle. To summarize that whole discussion, is basically here we are. What we have a concept of a process group that is in Pumbaa guide, in ISO, that help us understand the concept of how do we handle an action item, right? Or basically a stage of the project. We plan it, we implement the work, we monitor and control, and we close when we are done, which is a repeated cycle. So we have that is a generic, and that concept apply on any type of the project, regardless what industry you are in, as a concept. Now, with some variation, of course. However, what's uniquely different, and that's where we need tailoring and customization, is the concept of the project life cycle. Now, in general, a project life cycle, we can agree that a project life cycle should have a time span, again, beginning to end. We can define those two terminal points later. So we have the life cycle. We have stages or phases along this life cycle. And ideally, we need to have decision point, which some people call phase exit, some people call kill point, some people call stage gates. In the oil and gas industry, engineering industrial, the concept of stage gate, this is what some people call the stage gate process, because the idea, the focus is that there need to be a decision point. Now, over the years, when we trained on project management, we hear people telling us, Munir, we don't have stage gate. In reality, I think everybody have stage gate, but you don't call them stage gate. Whenever you need to make decision about the project, whether to continue or not, that's a gate. Okay, whether you call it stage gate or not, that's a different point. But if any time along the life cycle where management have decision point, and decision point that could decide on what came before and what comes next, or authorizing to continue, is typically a form of a stage gate, even if you call it interim reviews, gate reviews, stage reviews, design reviews, whatever you call it, is a form of a gate. So process group are generic and they repeat across industries and domain, where life cycle are often, I will not say unique, because this is one of the confusion from the Pumbaa guide as well. When we say project are unique endeavor, yes, projects are unique, but project management is not necessarily unique. So a project management method for a certain industry, okay, it's quite similar for that industry, regardless what company or organization you work for. So if you are in the oil and gas, you typically have very similar life cycle, regardless whether you work in a small oil and gas company or large oil and gas company, small project or large project. If you work in IT, your life cycle would probably be somewhat similar. If you in IT, for example, software development. So regardless, if you're in defense industry, marketing industry, once you develop a method, and here what we are saying, we need to develop tailored, customized method to fit a domain, to fit a project type. Now, with that, I have maybe one or two more minutes of introduction, is that bring the topic is that, okay, project management within a group of domain that might be similar, hence the idea of verticals, right? So for example, we talk about, and now this is one thing we are doing in our Aruk software solutions that we are developing. We are using the concept of tailored method, that are customized method based on a domain or type or industry and size and complexity of the project, but we can group them. So we're going to have a vertical called CIP. which is I'm calling CIP, and that means capital intensive project, right? And usually another name for this would be facilities project. Any project that produce some kind of a facility, whether it's a real estate, a house, a medical, a clinic, in petrochemical, a chemical plant, in power, a substation, or a power generation unit. At the end of the day, we are producing some kind of facility. Typically, these are what I'm calling the capital intensive project, because usually these project costs in the million to billions of dollars, depend on how big of the project. Now, whether we are working in power plant or oil and gas or petrochemical or real estate development, the life cycle are quite similar in that case. If we're talking about life cycle now, the beginning for a life cycle in our definition is the ideation and the concept, all the way to operation. So now I'm talking about defining the endpoint. For the capital intensive project, the starting point will be ideation and concept, and the final point, at the end, will be after the plant, the facility is handed over to operation, and then ideally we do the final acceptance testing, and we consider the project part is done, or we can do the PLC closure. We close the life cycle of the project, although the product of the project will shift into the operating mode. So for CIP, for capital intensive project, we see there are a lot of similar methods. So we have that as a vertical. And then, for example, in technology, we could have another vertical. In defense industry, we can have another vertical. In event and marketing and outreach management, we can have another vertical. In government project, we can have another vertical. Now, that is the idea that we are presenting. So obviously, I'm starting this to become a discussion and a debate, stating with our position is that verticals are not only nice to have, I think they are a must have in order to increase the chance of success in project. With this, I will rest and open the discussion for others to share their thought, a question. And if people have a question, feel free, anybody can answer. Doesn't have to be me. Ready?
Okay, so I'll kick it off.
Okay.
I'm going to ask this question because I think it's one that gets missed a lot. Verticals are about product development, not necessarily about project management. So if we are to look at the different quote unquote life cycles, the biggest challenge I see, and I've worked in a lot of verticals, is that there's no bridge between product development and project management.
Correct.
So clarity becomes important. So is the vertical going to be product related or industry related?
Excellent question. And I missed that point to raise. The way, the SOCAD way or the Munir or the Uruk way, if we have to say, is that when we talk about project management, in the past, maybe I need to go back to the past in the history, and even with the Pumba guide and other guide as well. First, I am going to make a statement. I don't recall any real project. I mean, obviously, I'm not a researcher on the subject, but based on my years of experience in project management, I haven't seen many guide or references, for example, that include operation as part of project management, because there is a view, and we have multiple views of what is project management. So maybe to answer your question, Sandra, I need to start there. Some view project management as purely technical, specialist type of work, that the project start after the project is authorized. And this is the Pumba guide, and I used to follow that principle. After the project is already authorized and we have a project charter, that's when project start and project management start. And then it ends when we hand over the product to the end users or to the operator or the company. So from that perspective, their beginning and end is that the beginning is later than the way we view it, and the end is earlier than the way we view it. So their life cycle is shorter, right? Because it focuses on what they think project management should be focused on. And I call that the pure technical project management approach. I think that over the years have shown that it hasn't worked well enough. And this is why in recent years, we've been hearing more about benefit management and the idea. And sometimes we shift from the project manager being almost a clerk to the project management need to be a strategic thinker. So the alternative view that we have adopted, and that's what we're using to build our solution, is that project management is product oriented. Yes, the project management, I mean, to estimate projects, the principle of estimating, the principle of scope definition, work packaging are universal. They don't care about the product. However, to ensure success of the project, we must integrate project management with product development and operation. So basically integrating project management with the business and operation. So we are integrating as both sides. And as a result, project management is definitely, although it is project management is independent if we want to think about the pure project management. However, in order to manage project successfully, our view is that it must integrate. As a result of that, our methodology has to be product delivery and project management. So when we are building a methodology for project management, it is, again, I'm repeating myself, a product delivery or product development plus project management. They must be integrated. Hence the idea of vertical. Yes, the vertical are related to the product, but in a way that also affect how we manage that product development. Because at the end of the day, our objective is to deliver success. And success is not finishing on time on schedule. Success is achieving the product objective, achieving the objective of the organization that launched this project from an owner perspective, for example, right? So this is why we see project management must integrate with product development, and the vertical is around product development. Long answer, but I think this is, we need to get that history with it.
Well, I think the risk always is, and I mean, the 1984 white paper for the PMBOK was the best version of it. If you can find it anywhere, it was 48 pages double-sided. And it focused on, from a project management perspective, on what would be considered core competencies.
Yeah.
Now, did it go sideways down the road? Absolutely. However, I think that as part of the Barak team, I think as we approach this, it becomes really important for it not to become rigid, that
Yes.
it's considered a framework, not a methodology, because a methodology implies it's a recipe, and it's not. So the ability for it to be tailored to fit a predictive environment, to hit a hybrid environment, for it to deal with design for value type projects and all of those types of things becomes really critical. So for me, man, I've run all kinds of projects. I use the foundational 6 of project management, and it doesn't really matter what the product or service is.
Okay. Which are?
And so the first one is a scope of work.
Yeah.
Absolutely crucial, tied to whatever documents that drive that.
Yeah.
Then the work breakdown structure, or if this is an adaptive project and you're going into scope planning, they still have a form of a work breakdown structure. They just don't call it that.
Correct.
So terminology, being able to adjust terminology on the fly becomes extremely critical.
Yeah.
Then estimates, which nobody likes to do, and there really aren't any good flexible estimating tools out there except what people build in Excel, right? Because you can do whatever you want in Excel. Scheduling, which this is a huge education problem in project management, because preliminary schedules in many industries are created not as a roadmap or the GPS for the team. It's created as a box drawing tool to get the project approved. And I think it to a large degree, that's part of the challenge, and it takes too much time to update. So people don't, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing to drive that forward. And then time tracking, which if you're in a costing project, if you're in oil and gas or you're in construction, anything that's 100% billable, tracking is urgent. But in internal projects, sometimes they're not 100% billable. So the challenge now is, how are we flexible enough that it deals with that tracking back end? Because to some degree, the tool is only going to be as good as the people who use it.
Absolutely.
And so those tracking components, so the foundational 6 scope of work, the schedule, the budget, change, risk, and tracking. So change management is huge, risk management is huge. And if you can get those 6, project management becomes, or project delivery becomes easier for people to choose. So product development is over here. If I'm in ideation, I still have a scope of work, a schedule, a budget, risk, change, and tracking. So
Correct.
that's where the PMBOK has gone completely sideways. And they're working desperately to bring it back. And I don't know if anybody but me's read the 7th edition. It didn't get any prettier.
Okay. I think what you're raising, that basically the fundamental you're talking about, Sandra, are definitely related to the processes and the knowledge area, which is, we agree. I think we agree that every project must have some kind of a schedule. Every project must have some kind of a budget. However, what often different between the verticals is the terminology, right? And the level of effort. For example, when you talk about stage gate process, to anybody in oil and gas, that become immediately known. They know exactly what we're talking about. If I go to an IT software team and talking about stage gate process, they think I'm talking maybe a secret, right? They wouldn't even have a clue what I'm talking about, or what is the concept of stage gate. When we talk about scheduling, some people who advocate agile today, we don't need scheduling. We just need to time box our sprint and we're done, or maybe this is Scrum. So even within the basically all those fundamental items you mentioned, they are necessary for all type of project. Their level and depths of their use and the level of expertise for their use different. For example, another example I share, in oil and gas, we have something called project management team. You go to anyone outside oil and gas, they don't have a clue what the project management team is. They think the project manager is the only project manager, is the only person who manages the project. They don't understand we need to have planner, scheduler, cost estimator, cost control people, quality specialist, safety specialist. All of these are part of the project management team. They're not involved in doing the technical work. So these are the type of differences that we see between different domains. And to focus on the word methodology, yeah, I agree. We use the term methodological approach I prefer to use to create tailored methods that are fit for purpose. So basically, if I am managing a real estate development project, my method would look in terms of the life cycle, would probably look the same or similar. And of course, what would be different than the management, the style, the culture of the organization, the characteristic of the project manager, the skill of the people involved. This will make a difference on the project and how we manage the project. But in terms of the sequence and the steps, there are certain, in some industries, the steps are more loose, where in other industries, the steps need to be more defined. That was basically one of the arguments. Peter, I'm not sure if anybody is following some of the chat. There is a lot of note from Peter. I don't know if you want us to read them as we get the time, or would you like to elaborate on some of them?
No, Munir. I mean, you know me, I tend to overshare.
No, it's good because I mean, you've been involved in, you were not involved in the PMBOK 7 edition, but you're involved in the ISO latest edition, which is somewhat using similar concepts as a guide, right?
No. So ISO 21500 2012, I think, as many of you may be aware, was very much based on PMBOK, or a dated version of the PMBOK.
Yeah.
We made a very conscious decision in ISO Technical Committee 258 Project Program Portfolio Management not to be constrained by that structure.
Okay.
So we took a very, very different approach. In fact, one of the objectives for 21502 was to be what we sort of call agnostic. Not focused on the how-to, more focused on the what and the why. Now, to apply to all projects. Slightly different approach. Didn't focus on process, focused on process, or practices rather. So it was a different model that was taken. But I think we're all in violent agreement with what you've been talking about.
Okay.
And another just quick observation, IPMA is also looking at possibly taking a more vertical approach within its model and structure. Now, haven't quite figured out what that means yet, but thinking that it might make the material more accessible to the different communities, industries. That's sort of where their head's at. Anyway, just an observation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole reason, back in 2007, when I started working on our methodological approach, is because neither IPMA or PMI offered a methodological approach. And IPMA, because it wasn't as well known in my region, so it wasn't much of a factor, but their focus is on competence, whereas PMI focused on the process group, and it became quite popular because of certification. It created confusion because people assumed, in our training classes, we used to hear people say, Munir, I understand exactly what you're saying, but I still do not know how to apply it. Or maybe a guy in a ministry told me, Munir, we certified 50 PMPs, we still do not know how to manage project. Because people were looking at the PMBOK guide as a prescriptive process, as a methodological process. And it wasn't. Because it offers a suggestion, it offers guideline, it offers guidance, and it's up to us in organization to develop our own internal processes based on the type of the project we manage in whatever organization we work for, and develop our own internal method. And regardless how much we want to make those methods restrictive or open for customization and further tailoring. And I think that is created. So we felt that the market is missing this big gap, is that how do we apply, and this is maybe when my focus for the last 15 years has been on the application of project management principle, using principle like what IPMA offer from a competence perspective to the process and the knowledge area, and including also GPM was the concept of sustainability and the idea of focusing on that. How do we do that? How do we offer our user a practical approach that is somewhat prescriptive, but not restrictive? Maybe I don't know if I'm saying the way it should be.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Perspectives on taking that. I mean, if so, realizing this is being recorded, so I'll be careful.
No secret.
So we had a recent interesting experience within ISO. So our IPMA Technical Committee 258. There was an NWIP, a project charter put forward to consider doing a document on agile. Agile adaptive methods. Now, there's absolutely no reason right now to go down that path, but the focus for us within the TC has been, so 21502 is focused on, as we mentioned, the project life cycle, not the delivery approach. Delivery approach would be something like agile. But one of the really interesting things that has come out of our investigations, or our discussions at least, a lot of the perceived, unique, agile approaches, specifically in the Americas, are already incorporated in 21502. I mean, 21502 is just basic project management. There's nothing terribly new or creative or innovative about it. This is project management. But the fascinating thing has been that a lot of what they would consider unique and revolutionary on the agile side is actually incorporated in what most of us would call project management. We use different names, we use different perspectives, but the concepts and the outputs are already in effectively what we're doing in many of the project management approaches. I thought it was an interesting observation that we were having.
Excellent.
I think, Peter, that's a really great observation, because that's mine as well, based on sort of working in a lot of different industries, is that there's not a whole lot of rocket science here. You know, do you think that the Egyptians built the pyramids and worried about whether they were using agile or predictive or whatever? You know, I mean, project management is not new. And I tell my team members that all the time. They've been doing this since Stonehenge. Get over yourself. You know, so I think the comment, Munir, that you make about being prescriptive but not restrictive is spot on, right? It has to be a framework that allows adaptability to match both the industry and the business. And if it's the Canadian government, forget about it, because they're just like hopeless. And that's recorded, and I don't care if that goes up.
Well, it's because again, following on those lines, I mean, you know, the project life cycle is the project life cycle. I mean, I think, you know, eventually it's generally understood. But what we find is there's a bit of conflict is that a project could have multiple delivery approaches. You know, it's not an either or situation. It could be predictive, it could be iterative, agile, whatever you want to call it. You know, a project could have multiple delivery approaches. And as you're saying, Munir, you know, as long as you've got a framework, tailorable and adaptive to the situation, spot on.
Well, and for our view, we really simplified that into a single question that give us two development approaches, right? I mean, two general themes, which is basically, and when I talk about, let's go beyond waterfall and agile, is the question is that what is the product of the project, right? So basically, when I'm talking about a project, what is a product? Can the product be delivered in pieces? And in pieces meaning iteration or increment? If the answer is yes, and by delivered, in my view, and this is, I think sometimes a lot of people who promote agile, sometimes they want to play games with the idea of, for example, they go back, we follow the agile manifesto, which is a working software, said, okay, and we need to add value to the customer. How do we define that? To me, the way I translate that, when I say working software, that means the software is working. And then the idea of adding value to the customer, that means the customer is using it. Otherwise, it's just work packaging. If we don't hand over the iteration or the increment to the customer to start using it, then it's just another work package. Like I built a foundation for a house, but I still cannot live in the house, right? So to me, when I look at definition of delivery, said, can the project be delivered in pieces? And again, I emphasize delivered meaning delivered to the customer for the customer to start using, whether internally or sell it to their customer. Okay, then we'll use iterative or incremental development, right? If the project cannot be delivered in pieces, or it's not logical to deliver in pieces, like a house, okay, yes, I can deliver the foundation, I can deliver the structure, but technically the customer doesn't care until the house is built and ready to move in, so I can live in it, right? Then we use what I call the Big Bang. Now, of course, there are variations on these, but really there are these two development approach. And this is, I guess, what I'm explaining here is the philosophy we're using in the Uruk development, is that what type of method development approach you would follow? Well, if it is something that has to be delivered, a facility, now a facility, I can phase it. If it's a huge facility, it's a mega project, but that still is called phasing approach, is not and I don't want to get into the debate of agile and waterfall. So I avoid the word waterfall and I avoid the word agile. Said, okay, is it a big bang development? That means I have to deliver the facility at the end to the customer so the customer can start operating it, or I can deliver an iteration and increment, and that is iterative incremental, or what people would like to call agile. I think these are the primary to development approach. However, what we forget that is not the project. That only applies, the development approach only apply when we get toward delivery or implementation work, the stage of the project. We still have to have the concept stage at the very beginning in the ideation to define what the business case is. We still need to do a feasibility. We still need to define the business requirement, right? All of these are needed regardless whether you want to use a big bang or iterative incremental. And this is why sometimes we say, when we talk about hybrid, in reality, hybrid is nothing more than traditional project management, except I think it's a fancier name that people come up with, so in order not to admit that it is traditional project management. So in order for us to manage any project, we follow a certain life cycle as we agree that is a life cycle is definitely necessary. But what I found out, and based on my experience on using on my internal project, is that the first few stages of a project, they are relatively the same, whether you want to use iterative incremental, or you want to use agile, or you want to use big bang or waterfall, or whatever you want to call it. The difference start to happen as we get closer to the delivery phase, where we might have now to say, okay, if I want to do incremental, then I don't do a lot of upfront planning. I still need to do some kind of planning, but doesn't have to be detailed or detailed design. Detailed design will become part of the increment, for example. I think that is an approach how we need to distinguish in terms of when we manage project, regardless what approach we are using, we still need to think about the whole life cycle, unless our job is only to manage the development phase. If I'm a software development vendor, I only care about developing the software. When my customer give me their specs and the requirement and contract, then that is a different than if I'm going to do from the beginning. Anyone else would like to share or ask question? Feel free. Okay, then let me go back to the original question and the purpose of this webinar. Do we think that tailoring or having a different type of customized tailored method that link to the product development and the vertical would help us in project management? Or is not necessary? Maybe I shouldn't say it hurt, because I don't think it hurt, but maybe it is not necessary. What do we think? And it could be yes or no.
I perceive that it is important. Here's an observation from risk management. So I'm also doing stuff in the ISO risk management community. We were developing a guideline a little while ago. And what we discovered was that people were arguing about things, but we had no idea what they were arguing about. Okay. Different perspectives, different understandings, different words, whatever. And what we're doing now is sort of doing concept diagrams to help understand the different perspectives. But in terms of projects, people approach things differently. As you and Duncan constantly mention, if you're doing a capital project, a construction project, that is completely different than a, for giggles, let's say IT project or something else. I mean, it's apples and coconuts. But if we can provide sort of those vertical delivery approaches, I don't know, whatever the right word is, I'm not sure. But if we could see collectively those different verticals and understand the differences and the different perspectives, wording, whatever, that may help our community understand what everyone's talking about.
Okay.
And it also may make it easier to, communicate with those specific verticals and get them engaged.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think that we talk about tailorable as opposed to tailoring. And the reason I say that is because depending on where you are, tailoring means something completely different. It doesn't mean the ability to customize or adapt to a particular project. And when PMI put that term out, I just shook my head because I work with a number of people for whom English is a second language, and occasionally tailoring is finding a person who will shape your clothes. And so it causes customization, conversations that probably shouldn't happen. And I think if we're going to talk to verticals, then what it means is that you can adjust this framework to match your need, and that product or service, and in this instance, I would use product or service as the same term. So if I'm developing a service, it is still a product to some degree.
Correct.
Then we make the point that you pick what you need to meet the scenario or the situation that you're in. And that's the biggest problem with the PMBOK, is the implication is that you need to do all 49 processes in the 6th edition and all of this other stuff in the 7th edition. And it started out its life as, for all intents and purposes, Grey's Anatomy for project management, and it went badly off the rails. And I don't mean the TV show, but the anatomy book. But really think to the terminology that you use, and can we find a way not to use the word vertical? I don't know what other word I would give you right now.
Okay.
But because a vertical to me implies that you would only use it for accounting, or only use it for construction, or only use it for a regulated project. Is there some term that would better fit what you describe? Because you're not really describing a vertical as much as you are an industry or an approach to a specific kind of product that you're building. So whether it's a capital project, whether I'm building mining equipment, whether I'm putting in a forge furnace, those really aren't always a vertical. So do we back ourselves out of that connection to product development and project management if we say, use this here, use this here, use this here? Because project management's a life skill. We all use it to some degree every day.
Yeah, and I think for us, the intent is not to get into that project, we're trying to reinvent project management. That's definitely the intent, because as you said, the project management has existed since the pyramid days, or maybe even before. Actually, Uruk, the name goes back to the city of Uruk in Mesopotamia, which is probably even before the pyramid.
And the tablets.
Yeah, and then basically idea is that, yes, obviously they use some type of project management to build the city, right? So basically, we're not reinventing project management. What we're trying to say that, okay, let's take the theory and the concept and the principles of project management, and then how can we make them easier to understand by the different vertical. I'm still using the word vertical, but I will come back to your point. And then in order to make it more appealing or more understandable, so this organization can go from theory to application of the concept. Now, what you raise on the term vertical, that's a very good entry to our advisor meeting after this call. I couldn't think of any other term to use for this. If there are others, like risk, we have risk. We still need to debate what to use or how do you define risk, right? So these are some of the dangerous minefield terminology, I think, in project management we need to navigate around. But obviously the intention, what we're trying to do is that again, how can we make the principle of project management frameworks, more adaptable to different domain. And this is, if you go back to our original terminology of the methodologies that we developed, we did not use the word tailoring. We called it customizable and adaptable methodology for managing project. So how do we customize and adapt based on the need of the organization, the need of the domain, the need of the industry? So yeah, if anybody have any, so let's stay focused. We still have a few minutes only. We've heard from Peter and Sandra. If anybody else want to jump in on the idea of, so is the idea of vertical, let's put it quote unquote now, is that something of value for us in project management? And then if somebody have another term for vertical, they want to jump in and share with us, we'd be happy to hear. Anyone else would like to comment on the idea of whether vertical is useful or not? Maybe domain, different domain, some of the audience, what type of industry you work in? If you're shy to talk, feel free to put it in the chat.
I think, Monit, regarding the verticals, this is Abhishek here.
Hi, Abhishek.
Hi. So regarding the verticals you're talking about, this is basically the top-down approach, right? When you have, certain organization structure and you have well-defined roles. And
not
you,
the organization structure, more of the project type. Yeah.
Yeah, project types. Yeah. Okay. So I think that will be more applicable for this traditional project management. But in case of agile, you need to have this decentralized decision-making process, because when you're working with an agile teams, which are self-organized team, so the decision-making.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you're working with self-organized team, so part of the decision-making is also taken by the team, also the development and the operation team.
Yeah. I mean, obviously depend on the type of the project. If I'm building, for example,
Yes.
a petrochemical plant, right? Then who's the team? And then
if you have a petrochemical plan, if you have a well-defined plan and then the well-defined scope, and you know that there will be hardly any changes in the requirements.
Yeah.
So obviously that is the case. You can always go for this, traditional project management, waterfall, because you know the requirements are not going to change. But in case of software development or anything, you are working on a product with the features.
Yeah.
Or or any website landing page launch or something like that, when you know that where the customer feedback is very important, considering the market condition and how the product market fit, and if you have a competitor, what is the differentiator of your product and what is your USP. So when all these things you need to consider, you need to have a customer feedback as early as possible. So in that case, is always definitely go for the agile, because you cannot go for the upfront plan. Obviously, you have a plan, but it's a short-term plan. That's why where the iteration and sprint comes into the picture. So again, it depends on the project.
Yeah.
That what you are going to make. You are working for the product, software products or anything with the multiple features, and because if you go for the waterfall or anything with the well-defined scope, and by the time the customer handed over the product to the customer, that time you see the change in the market condition and customers say, we don't want this feature anymore. So all you have to come back again and start working. So that this risk factor is very high, especially this kind of projects. But again, if you're working in the construction, when you know that you have a plan and scope is very good, and so in that case you can use the waterfall. So again, it depends on the project.
Yeah, the idea though is we don't use waterfall ever, even in construction project. Waterfall to us doesn't exist. What you're saying is, I agree with you 100% on the term of the software and the business project. However, I think there are often misunderstanding about capital project. And let me answer you with a shared story. Years ago, like almost 30 years ago now, I was involved with a mega project. The company I was for, we were considering building a petrochemical plant in Singapore. And then because of the market condition, we chickened out and we delayed the project for a year. Our competitor did not care. Okay. So by the time we were ready to, we put our project on hold. By the time we were ready to start our project, our competitor were already halfway through construction. So what I'm trying to say is that the idea of customer feedback, the idea of market condition, the idea of changes, it happened even on mega projects.
Yes, definitely, because
yeah.
I think this when you are without doing the market research with the qualitative and the quantitative data, you know, whether in internal customer or external customer, and understand this product market fit. Is it the right time to launch the product, to understand the market condition? So that is the utmost priority before you even start working on the project. Because after the research, the plan will come, then we'll do the design, then you develop, you deploy, then you refine, then again come back to continue with the product, or you kill the product.
Absolutely.
It depends on the viability of the product in the market. So so this cycle goes on like that, even in constructions everywhere.
Yep.
Right, especially after pandemic, the things have changed a lot.
Excellent.
And most importantly, the most importantly, you know, every company now they're more concentrating on this operational expenditure rather than the capital. You know, for example, if you're migrating your this cloud migration instead of on-premise, for example, any software company, like, you know, they're more into the operational expenditure rather than the, you know, on-premise. You have to spend lots of money, capital expenditure, when you are going for the software, hardware, everything. Where in the cloud migration, the third party is handling over. You just need to do the operational cost and on your need basis, you know. So so everybody wants to save their money, and they want to, you know, take things as it comes. There is nobody is working. It's more into the, and everywhere, even in the supply chain also, you know, people are working. They are not keeping their, you know, inventory like the previously, you know, the lots of inventory. They're optimizing the inventory. They're doing the ABC analysis. What are the most important inventories they're giving there? You know, they're doing this Pareto analysis. What are the 20% product giving 80% of, you know, profit? So everybody is, you know, understanding the inventory, because your company money tied with the inventory. So everybody is careful, because after the pandemic, the way the supply chain has, you know, blocked, when the incident of Suez Canal, you know, where basically all the shipment was stuck, and every company suffered because of over dependency of China, like, you know, all these materials and everything, raw materials. So now that's why people are more into their, you know, local vendors, like, you know, to boost their local economy. So things are changing.
I need to give a chance for others to. We have 5 more minutes left. Anyone else would like to share? Thanks, Abhishek. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody last minute chance, last closing comment? Peter, Sandra, anyone?
Good afternoon. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, please go ahead. Mr. Muhammad, go ahead.
Yeah, I just recently joined, and it seems that I was told that it's 7 p.m. here, so I just joined by the neck of time.
Oh,
is there a chance you can, you know, share some recordings of this session, just like you told that we are just about to end or something?
Yeah, it is being recorded, and then either today afternoon or tomorrow we will upload it to our YouTube channel.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, quite welcome. Anyone else? All right, then let's close it. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I do appreciate your time. And it was great, better than I expected, because I did not want to do a PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to create a discussion like this, and hopefully we'll be able to do more webinar like this, where it is a discussion rather than just one-way presentation. Maybe even down the road we can do debates, and we can do panels. Thank you again, and as I mentioned, we will share the recording this afternoon or tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Munir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.